Do you like Prohibition-era car chases? Strange old comic strips? Or maybe a sailor caught with 8 wives is more your thing? These are all stories I found while researching Daily History Shorts. Here's those stories and all the others I found for June 1925. June 1st, 1925. His face may be fortune, but it's not his regular face. He's just trying out for a job in the movies as having America's funniest face. And Martin K. Giles of Rock Hill, South Carolina says that if he does lose, it won't be by a lip. Cows have feast on airplane wings, banana oil sauce. Lieutenant Harry G. Crocker, United States Army aviator who flew here from Kelly Field, San Antonio, Texas, Saturday to serve as an attendant at a wedding, will be delayed several days on his return flight because the wings of his airplane, treated with banana oil, proved too tempting a feast for a drove of cows at the local field yesterday. A Memphis aviator, whose aeroplane previously had provided dinner for cows, called a police guard for Lieutenant Crocker's machine Saturday night. The policeman was called to the Southern League baseball park to quell a riot this afternoon, and the cows dashed to their feast of aeroplane wings, served with banana oil dressing. June 2nd, 1925. Wife tries to tear up love letter, alimony case factor. Destruction of a love letter which was to have been used by a husband against his wife as a leverage to bring down the high cost of alimony was frustrated by Judge E.T. Fairchild in Circuit Court Monday. The wife was Mrs. Stella Kalupa, whose husband, Anthony, manager of the Southside Armory, recently was found guilty of contempt of court for failure to pay an alimony arrearage of $110. Kalupa paid up in the meantime and Monday appeared before Judge Fairchild to get a reduction of the $60 a month allowance he is paying his wife. In support of his contention, he submitted a letter alleged to have been received by Mrs. Kalupa from a man trying to make a date with her. Mrs. Kalupa was called to the stand, and when the judge, in pointing to the signature, asked her whether that was her lover, she said no. A few seconds later, and while Judge Fairchild was talking to one of the attorneys, the woman began tearing up the letter and was prevented from completely destroying the evidence by the court's interference. As a result of Mrs. Kalupa's action, the special hearing of her case was set for late Monday. June 3rd, 1925. Salistad married to Sunshine Girl, day she is freed. Edward J. Salistad and Dorothy Anderson, his Sunshine Girl, were married here last night, it became known today. The woman was released yesterday from the Industrial Home for Women. Full permission to marry was granted by the parole board according to the marriage license. Salistad, serving a term for arson, recently was released from the reform school and obtained employment here. Late yesterday, Miss Anderson was paroled, the rules being sufficiently lax to permit her to be absent as a trustee during the time that will be required for her parole to be acted upon by the governor. Salistad was accused of disinterring a body and burning it to give the impression that he had perished. He and the girl were later captured in California. Don't be a writer of Nixie letters. Mistakes cost US millions yearly. Miss Bloomer Finlayson, one of the directory clerks at the Seattle Terminal Post Office Station, handling Nixies, those imps of the Postal Service, letters with insufficient addresses. Miss Finlayson was interrupted by the star cameraman as she sought to complete an address on a Nixie. Don't be a Nixie letter writer, says Uncle Sam during Better Mailing Week, in which a national campaign is being waged to correct the careless errors of the mail. A Nixie is a piece of mail so poorly addressed and wrapped that it can neither be delivered nor returned to the sender without a special service treatment that is costing the Post Office Department $2 million annually. That's the reason Uncle Sam started Better Mailing Week. He wants to eliminate that huge expense and educate the public on how to mail their letters. He wants to do away entirely with the curse of the Nixies. June 4th. 1925. DC girl held on liner. Catherine Welch arrested in Britain, stowed away to see battlefields. Guarded by 2 husky firemen to prevent her from escaping, Miss Catherine Welch of Washington DC stood a demure figure in the third-class gangway of the steamer Empress of France today, and told of her denied ambition to see the French battlefields where she had served during the war. She arrived here as a stowaway on the liner, and will be started on her return voyage to the United States sometime today aboard the steamer Melita. When the correspondent went aboard, she greeted him with the smiling and eager question, "Are you the American consul?" She appeared crestfallen when she learned the arrival was a newspaperman. "I stowed away because I wanted to go to France to learn the French language," she explained. "I had neglected the language when I was there before. Of course, I could have got funds from the old folks to pay my fare, but I thought it would be a great lark to stow away and see if I could get away with it. I didn't realise it is a serious offence. As a matter of fact, I still thought the whole thing was a huge joke until I came up against the British immigration officials. They soon made me realise that I had gotten myself in an awful mess. They were very kind, but I guess I am sort of a criminal for the time being. Anyway, there are folks in Europe who will send me funds to pay my fare home." It was not folks in Europe who came to her financial rescue, but relatives in Springfield, Ohio. They cabled funds to cover her passage both to Europe and back to the United States. "What added to my troubles," Miss Welch continued, "was that I left my passport at home. I didn't want my identity known if I was caught as a stowaway. Now I realise it was a silly idea. I would have been much better off with the passport, and might have been allowed to go to Paris." June 5th, 1925. Egg is fried on hot paving of avenue in 9 minutes by a stopwatch. Hot enough to fry an egg on Pennsylvania Avenue today. Probably thousands of Washingtonians said it at one time or another. It's as bromidic as the one about the humidity. Only one known person actually did fry an egg on the avenue today, but he reported perfect success. At the corner of 14th and the Avenue, surrounded by an admiring and interested crowd of spectators, Daniel Sweeney Ring, journalist and investigator of 3rd Street, placed an egg carefully on the asphalt at 12:42 o'clock. With an accurate stopwatch, he carefully checked and witnessed the product of his impromptu culinary art. At 12:44 o'clock, the edges had begun to sizzle. At 12:46, the yolk began to cook, and at 12:51, exactly 9 minutes after the laying of the egg, it was fried to the Queen's taste, done to a turn, and palatable enough looking for any epicure. To date, however, it had not been eaten. This was because it was reported when the egg was picked up, a thick layer of melted asphalt was clinging to the underside. Several persons who witnessed the egg laying were reported to have clucked loudly when the results were made public. Others crowed. June 6th, 1925. Reflections of Dorothy Dix. Dear Miss Dix, I am engaged to a young woman whom I love, but who I am afraid to marry because she criticises everything I do. She finds fault with my voice, she corrects my pronunciation, she tells me when we go to a show not to talk, and when I made her a present she almost threw it in my face, and told me that if I couldn't give her something better than that, not to give her anything at all. Evidently, I am not her ideal, and I think we would both be miserable if we got married. Don't you? SR. Answer. I am sure you would, SR, and you are a wise man to take the tip the lady has handed you in time to break off an ill-advised marriage. Nothing in the world wrecks the happiness of a home quicker than having a critic on the hearth, who is always turning the spotlight on our faults and weaknesses. Perhaps it is good for our souls to be told of our shortcomings, but nobody enjoys it. It is too much like being flayed alive, and none of us would care for that as a part of our daily lives. It is too painful a process. Personally, I think there is no more disagreeable an individual than the person who thinks that he or she knows it all, and who feels that his or her bounden duty is to set you right on every point, whether it is of any importance or not. You try to tell a story, and they spoil the point by interrupting you to say that the event you are describing didn't happen at 4:15 as you said it did, but at 4:25, or that it took place in August 1923 instead of July 1924. They puncture your little balloon just as you are soaring up, and make everything fall flat and lifeless by correcting your grammar or your pronunciation, and you finally get so that you are afraid to speak in their presence. As I said, none of us like persons who criticise us, and we particularly hate it in our husbands and wives, because it hurts our vanity so. We can't bear the knowledge that those we love do not admire us, and that they think us so inferior to themselves that they are trying to lift us up to their level. This is particularly galling to a man. He likes to think that to his wife, at any event, he is an oracle, that she respects his opinion and looks up to him, no matter what a cold and callous world may do. And when she turns critic, he is very apt to take his wounded vanity to some lady who will poultice it with soothing flattery. Therefore, my earnest advice to you is to break off your engagement to the critical lady and marry a girl who likes you as you are, and who thinks that you don't need polishing up to suit her taste. Dorothy Dix. June 7th, 1925. Lucky dog. Scientists are baffled when fleas refuse to remain on canine. A dog on which fleas will not remain has been found by the Department of Agriculture. Experts who used dogs to fatten fleas found a bullpup on which no fleas would live. As fast as the insects were placed on the dog, they would hop off, and now the scientists are trying to find out what the dog knows about fleas that they don't. Tokyo waitresses will form union, ask ban on tips. The lot of some 30,000 waitresses employed in the restaurants of Tokyo is about to become a more happy one if the newly formed Waitresses Association successfully achieves its objects. Down with tips is the slogan of the new organisation. A movement has been launched to abolish the practice of tipping in all restaurants as a means of elevating the morals of the waitresses and improving their working conditions. The objections of the waitresses to the tipping system now in vogue lies in the fact that tips are the sole source of revenue for waitresses. No salaries are paid the waitresses in Tokyo restaurants and cafes. In order to earn enough in tips to support them, the waitresses, according to officials of the association, are compelled to curry favour with the patrons of the restaurants by practices that are detrimental to the morals of the girls. Elimination of the tipping system and the substitution of regular salaries will benefit employers as well as the waitresses, it is declared. Under the present scheme, it is almost impossible for small restaurants to obtain competent help, for all the capable waitresses seek positions in the larger cafes where tips are more remunerative. Although some opposition to the association was manifested by employers who feared that it might become a source of disputes over wages, working conditions, etc., the leading restaurant keepers are said to approve the project and are giving it their support. June 8th, 1925. The Fox and the Stork 1 by W.J. Enright. A long time ago, the fox and the stork were great friends, so one fine day, the fox invited the stork to dinner. When she arrived, the fox served only a rich soup in shallow dishes, so while he had no trouble eating his share, the poor stork, because of her long bill, could not eat at all. So when she left the table, she was as hungry as when she sat down. "I am so sorry," said the fox, "that you didn't like my dinner." "That is all right, dear Mr. Fox," replied the stork. "I do wish you would return this visit and dine with me some day." Tomorrow, the fox dines with the stork. June 9th, 1925. The Fox and the Stork 2 by W.J. Enright. It was soon arranged that the fox should dine at the stork's house. But when they were seated, the food was in long-necked jars, and the fox could in no way reach it. And all he could do was lick the outside of the jar, while the stork dined with great ease and enjoyment. "I cannot say I am sorry," said the stork as the fox was leaving, "for you must expect to be treated by others very much as you treat them." June 10th, 1925. Youth, 17, shoots 1,500 bullseyes in row at 50 feet. A record of 1,500 consecutive bullseyes on a 50-foot range was scored by Samuel Moore, 17, of Newtonville, Massachusetts, in connection with National Rifle Day exercises there Saturday, according to information given out today by national officers of the Winchester Junior Rifle Corps here. A world's record is claimed for Moore's performance. It is stated that he shot for 7 hours 37 minutes before retiring. The statement adds that Moore's gun was so hot that it could not be handled, and that caused him to stop. A previous record of 1,093 bullseyes was made by Howard Burks at Fresno, California. In the winter, Burks was forced to stop by darkness. June 11th, 1925. May disqualify balloon winner. Belgian said to have been rescued at sea. It was reported here today that the Belgian M. Veenstra, pilot of the balloon Prince Leopold, who yesterday was declared winner of the Gordon Bennett Cup balloon race, which started from Brussels Sunday, might be disqualified. Reports here said he did not descend on land, but came down at sea off the northwestern coast of Spain. He was said to have been in the water 6 hours and to have been rescued by a passing steamer. A landing and rescue at sea would disqualify M. Veenstra and would leave the Belgian M. de Moiter, pilot of the balloon Belgica, as winner. 3 balloons have already been disqualified for landing at sea, including the Goodyear 3, piloted by the American Wade T. Van Orman. Information here was that the Prince Leopold landed 10 miles off the Spanish coast, when forced down by a sudden squall, and that M. Veenstra was rescued with much difficulty by the captain of the steamer Fernando from Vigo. In a rough sea and during a fog, the captain leaped into the water and saved the balloonist after repeated efforts. The announcement of M. Veenstra's flight yesterday said he landed at Cape Torinana, extreme northwestern Spain, more than 800 miles from Brussels. The American, Van Orman, had traversed about 441 miles before he fell in the sea off the Ushant Light. Ernest de Moiter of Belgium, winner of the first Gordon Bennett Cup race for balloons and now apparently in line for another victory, traversed 422 miles in this race and landed at Quimper, Brittany. June 12th, 1925. Hair pulling and face slapping ends in fine at Norway. Mrs. Selina R. Carr appeared in municipal court today on a complaint made by her niece, Mrs. Leontine R. Stiles, who charged that she was assaulted on May 13. Both are residents of Oxford and reputed to be millionaires, the respondent being the sister and the complainant the daughter of the late John P. Robertson, woolen manufacturer at Oxford. Mrs. Carr pleaded not guilty and waived examination. She was found guilty by Judge William F. Jones and fined $10 and costs, from which she appealed to the Supreme Court, which meets in October. She gave $200 bonds to keep the peace. While no evidence was taken, it was alleged that hair pulling and face slapping resulted from a dispute over a line fence. June 13th, 1925. Doctor who would abolish family, let state rear children, and institute free mating. Dr. Margaret Daniels, a member of the Students' Council of New York who recently startled the National Women's Party conference at Detroit when she urged that marriage and home be abolished. She suggested that men and women be allowed to mate freely, that children should be reared by the state, and that women should be free and independent. US sailor confesses having wives in 8 ports. Oh, for the life of a sailor, a wife in every port, chanted postal inspectors when Merritt Booth, a sailor stationed at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, who was arrested on a charge of sending obscene matter through the mail, is said to have admitted that he has 8 wives living here and elsewhere. Booth, whose ship recently arrived in this port, was arrested by Postal Inspector Kelly on a warrant issued nearly 2 years ago on complaint of a wife living in Texas. When arraigned before United States Commissioner Manley, the much-married Gob was held under a $1,000 bail for a further hearing. The warrant charges that while Booth visited Constantinople in the summer of 1923, he purchased obscene postal cards, which he enclosed in an envelope and sent to his wife in Texas. She forwarded them to the postal authorities, who issued a warrant for the man's arrest. June 14th, 1925. Swimmer saves drowning man, but loses medal. H.L. McMullen, crack swimmer of the Washington Canoe Club, who yesterday won a silver medal in a swimming race at Wardman Park Pool, lost it last evening in a grim race with death, which he also won, saving the life of a drowning fellow club member, Horace W. Dunnigan, well-known marathon runner. The medal winner, wearing his silver badge, and two friends, Carl Knight and Farnham Miller, were preparing to canoe on the Potomac about 6:30 last evening, when they saw Dunnigan seized with cramps while trying to swim out to a diving float in the river from the canoe club float nearer shore. Jumping in, fully clothed, the three men struck out after the drowning man. Reaching him first, McMullen succeeded in bringing him in after much effort. The silver medal was lost. Dunnigan had been under about 3 minutes, but was resuscitated without difficulty. June 15th, 1925. Pays $13 for having 13 persons in his 5-passenger car. 13 into 5 equals 13. This may not be good arithmetic, but it proved to be very good law in the traffic court today. Florence E. Phillips of 7th Street Southwest was arrested yesterday by policeman M.D. Smith of No. 4 Precinct for allowing 3 men to ride on the fenders of his car. Smith told Judge Isaac R. Hitt when the case was called today that there were 13 persons on and in the 5-passenger car Phillips was driving. Judge Hitt fined him $13, $1 a passenger, the judge said in passing sentence. June 16th, 1925. Hard life for deputy sheriffs. Deputies seem to be ready for anything, except work. The following letter was intended for the What Our Readers Think column, but due to its timely import, it is carried by itself. To the editor of the Milwaukee Leader, why is a deputy sheriff? I, and quite a few thousand other tax-burdened citizens, ask this question of each other and ourselves while watching Sunday's automobile races at State Fair Park. Hundreds of kids and adults with child minds swarmed over the track, risking death under the wheels of the speeding cars to get a closer glimpse of the race. Track officials did their best to hold the crowds back off the rails, where they would be comparatively secure if a car crashed, but they were only a handful, and the crowd they tried to handle numbered 1,000. While all this was going on, cliques of smiling, chatting deputy sheriffs in uniform and out stood about the track, apparently oblivious to their duty. There they stood, at least 15 of them, watching the cars whiz by while the county of Milwaukee was paying them salaries to see that the roads were patrolled and order in sections outside of city police jurisdiction preserved. Perhaps they had a nice time parading about in their natty uniforms, but that isn't discipline the people expect and demand of Sheriff Reichenbach. Mr. Reichenbach, you say the men were needed to handle the jam of traffic which ensued after the races were over. Quite right, but why, in the name of common sense, couldn't those men of yours enjoy the races and keep that swarming mob of people off the track and out of danger? Thanks to the drivers themselves, there were no accidents. Several times the cars came within a few meagre inches of the lines of gaping daredevils, but most drivers seemed to sense the danger and kept their cars well to the outside. Maybe some Sunday, a new driver from a country where things are not done thus will race at State Fair Park and crash into the mob on the track. Then there will be an investigation and revelations, Mr. Reichenbach. In order to emphasise my statements here, I am accompanying this letter with a photograph I was fortunate enough to obtain. It shows how one group of 4 uniformed deputies served. Respectfully, H.N. Milwaukee, June 14. June 17th, 1925. After 34 years, friends meet. College mates in Norway rejoined in Portland. It's a small world after all, P.A. Peterson of Patagonia said as he shook hands with the Reverend Frederick Engebretsen, pastor of the First Norwegian Danish Church of Portland. 34 years and uncounted thousands of miles of travel had intervened since the pair had been college mates and worked in far-off Frederikshavn, Norway together. It was one of those astonishing coincidences of real life, frowned on by fiction writers. They had lost contact with each other. Peterson went to Patagonia, where he was successful financially. Finally, he decided to leave the storm-swept region for more temperate climate in the United States. He came to Oregon, decided to remain in this state, and approached the Land Settlement Bureau of the Chamber of Commerce. He asked to be referred to some prominent local resident of his nationality, and was sent to Reverend Engebretson. The pair immediately recognised each other as pals of former years. June 18th, 1925. Shell from cutter brings back tug until movie men clear sea of wreck. Halted by a 4-pound shell from a Coast Guard cutter, a tug has been held for 2 days 75 miles off Sandy Hook to clear away wreckage occasioned by the dynamiting of a steamship in the making of a motion picture thriller. The Corvallis, a freighter that cost Uncle Sam $800,000 to build, was bought for $45,000, loaded with 7 tons of dynamite, rechristened Mandalay, towed to the Indian Ocean, and blown up just after the heroine had escaped. When the Mary A. Bicknell, the tug from which operations were directed, started back for New York without obeying directions to remove debris, the cutter Seneca pursued her. When a command to stop was not heeded, a shell across the tug's bow halted her. Edward P. Morse, president of the National Dry Dock Corporation, which staged the shipwreck for a film company, the captain, and 3 photographers, all seasick, were detained aboard the tug. And they'll be detained until water between the Hook and Barnegat is cleared of the mess they made, said a Coast Guard spokesman. June 19th, 1925. Divorces husband to wed his dad who won love. Mrs. Larita Clarice Simmons of Spanish Harbor, Florida, who is the central figure in a peculiar domestic battle. Recently, she divorced her young husband so that she could marry the father. Now, the first husband is suing his dad for $20,000 damage for taking his wife away. Thief returns automobile when gasoline runs out. An unusual automobile thief who returned a machine to its owner's door and rang the doorbell after he had used it came to the attention of the police Wednesday night. Frank E. Pelland, 10th Avenue, told the police he was awakened shortly before midnight by the persistent ringing of his doorbell. Answering it, he found that his automobile, which had been taken 2 days before, was standing in front of the house. The gasoline tank was empty, but the car had not suffered at the hands of the conscientious thief. Award race prize to Belgian pilot. The claim of W.T. Vanneman of Akron, Ohio to first prize in the Gordon Bennett Cup race was rejected today by the Aero Club, and the prize was awarded to the Belgian pilot, Veenstra. June 20th, 1925. Rum cars lost in smokescreen. 4 dry agents give chase to autos suspected of tooting liquor. After a chase of 30 miles, during which a smokescreen was used to blind them, Baltimore Prohibition agents today lost the quarry they were chasing on the Washington-Baltimore Boulevard, near Laurel, Maryland. 2 automobiles containing Prohibition agents Wolf, Shields, Trowell, and Sandsmeyer were patrolling the boulevard when they sighted 2 high-powered cars near Halethorpe. Suspecting them of carrying liquor, the Prohibition agents gave chase, and rapidly began gaining on them. However, just before reaching Laurel, the rear car began operating a smokescreen, which forced the pursuing cars to drop behind. The cars passed through Laurel at a high rate of speed, pursued by the Prohibition agents, but just before the automobiles reached Hyattsville, the suspected rum runners made good their escape. Thinking that the automobiles would go into Washington, the Prohibition agents telephoned from Hyattsville to the local police and a sharp lookout was kept, but so far, no automobiles answering their description have been taken into custody. June 21st, 1925. Jilt's Kid. Dagmar Dahlgren, actress, promised Kid McCoy, former boxer, to wait for him when he entered the California Penitentiary for manslaughter. But he's going to be in for a long time, so the other day she and Alex Kipper, her vaudeville partner was secretly married at Riverside, California. Reenact scene. Movie actor to wed woman who portrayed spouse. 5 years ago, William Bill Russell, a moving picture actor, sought a girl to portray his spouse before the camera. He selected Helen Ferguson. Tonight, they reenacted the scene more seriously when a marriage license was obtained here. They will be married, they said. June 22nd, 1925. Long days are short days for him, and when they're short, they're long for this worker. When days are long, they're short for James W. Hensley, Eastern Avenue, and when they're short, they're long. Sunday was the longest day of the year, and Hensley, as a result, worked his shortest day. Hensley, you see, is a city engineer, and is in charge of city lights. The sun rose at 4:16 a.m. Sunday, set at 7:17 p.m, and rose again this morning at 4:16 after the shortest night of the year, less than 7 hours. And streetlights are turned off half an hour before sunrise and turned on half an hour after sunset, in the residential district with slightly longer hours in the business section. Hensley tours the city nightly, inspecting the lights. Sometimes he covers as much as 100 miles. June 23rd, 1925. Man prevents woman from drowning twice in 2 years' time. 2 years ago, A.L. Boatwright, a travelling salesman, reached the Catawba River bathing beach near here in time to save Miss Catherine Williams of Charlotte from drowning. Yesterday, Boatwright again was passing the river beach and heard a woman's screams for aid. He jumped into the river, swam to the woman, and succeeded in rescuing her. Then he discovered that again he had saved Miss Williams from drowning. June 24th, 1925. Woman jailed for wrecking police auto. After wrecking a police auto and damaging another machine at 12th Avenue and Jackson Street early Wednesday morning, Mrs. Julia Treherne was arrested on a charge of driving while drunk. With her were 2 Navy sailors, H.E. Lettany, 24, and J. Jarosk, 27, who were jailed for being intoxicated. Patrolman G.C. Jensen, in a Prowler car, said the woman crashed into his machine and then struck another car. While being taken to headquarters in the patrol wagon, the woman is said to have smeared her police guards with white paint. These women writers don't forget beauty. There is a current belief that a woman, if she be literary at all, must of a necessity be unfortunately endowed as to physical features. Was it James Branch Cabell who said he could stand anything, but please not to place him next to a literary woman and expect him to enjoy his repast? However, the trainload of Theta Sigma Phi's who arrived for their convention in Seattle last night rather dispels this attitude. Evidently, pen women today are not too busy pounding their typewriters to keep an eye out for their appearance. The delegates were taken out to the various sorority houses where they will make their headquarters during their stay. Registration was scheduled for 8 o'clock this morning. Addresses by Dean M. Lyle Spencer and President Henry Cesallo are on today's programme. June 25th, 1925. Judge's daughter serves her drinks. Favour prohibition, she says, but sees no harm in disregarding it. More modern views on modern morals were aired today in connection with the Symington divorce case. Justice John Ford, while explaining that his unexpected statement from the bench about his daughter's cocktail parties did not mean he condoned drinking, maintained his position that cocktails, kisses, and short skirts are questions of manners, not of morality. Mrs. Esther Ford Waite, the judge's young married daughter, whom he pointed out in court as hostess of parties where cocktails were served, had her own say on the subject. I favour prohibition, she said, but as it cannot be enforced, I see no harm in taking a drink or two when I go out to parties, or in serving cocktails when I have some friends to dinner. Mrs. Waite added she was against indiscriminate drinking and pyjama parties for boys and girls. They are too young and impulsive. She concluded that young men should be allowed less freedom than young girls, for they are more dangerous than girls when they are gadding about. Meanwhile, the Symington trial, at which Justice Ford is presiding, was to resume with the defence opening its case. The action of Thomas H. Symington for absolute divorce from his wife, Ida May, will go to the jury before an adultery case against Talbot Chambers, principal co-respondent, is tried. Chambers, who admitted intimacies with Mrs. Symington, pleaded not guilty to a charge of adultery growing out of his testimony. Fumigating bums. Nightshirts are now supplied to tramps stopping at the workhouse here, so that their clothes may be fumigated. June 26th, 1925. Toss for man. Doris Lorenza and her sister, Lorette of Florida City, Florida, loved the same man. Having been chums as well as sisters, they decided to toss a coin to see who would marry the man who was the choice of both. Doris won, and Lorette stepped aside. The Worst Story I Have Heard Today by Will Rogers. Eddie Cantor, star of Kid Boots, Ziegfeld's biggest success, just sailed for Europe last week, and before he left, Mr. Ziegfeld had me present to him a beautiful watch, so he could be sure and be back here in September in time to start into work. Eddie and I used to be in the Follies together years ago, and he is a very fine, honest-to-goodness fellow. Well, the night he left, he told me some stories on the stage of the Follies in exchange for the watch, and to my mind, the worst one he told me was the following one. He was stepping in a room in a New York hotel, and somebody started monkeying with the keyhole. He went to the door, opened it, and there stood a man who the 18th Amendment had not been able to reach. "Excuse me, sir, wrong room." In a few minutes, came another fumbling at his door. He went there, opened it, and it was the same fellow. "Excuse me, sir, I am at the wrong room," said the man. Eddie went to bed, and as he was about to sleep, he was awakened by someone trying to open his door. He got up, opened it, and here was the same fellow again. He looked at Eddie and said, "My God, have you got every room in this hotel?" Well, we let Eddie get away to Europe, just to get rid of him and his terrible stories. June 27th, 1925. Girl robber blames men. "Men made me rob," said pretty Miss Margaret Dale when arrested in Maywood, a Chicago suburb, charged with holding up taxicab drivers. "I tried to find work, but the men wanted too much and paid too little," she told officers. Girl taken in wild race. Police capture Margaret Van Horn, who speeded 60 miles an hour. The ominous roar of two high-powered cars almost drowned the continuous scream of a police siren warning motorists along the Bladensburg Road northeast to get out of the way early today in one of the most thrilling chases participated in by Captain Burlingame's flying squadron. Hardly were the people on the road alive to the danger before a large car, over the wheel of which crouched a girl clothed in a flaming red dress and red hat, flashed by them, dodging cars in the way, swiftly followed by another car driven by the captain and occupied by policeman L.M. Wilson, Leo Murray, and revenue agent Hartman. Girl driver daring. During the whole length of the chase from the district line to Mount Olivet Cemetery, a distance of 2 miles, the girl in red, Margaret Van Horn, of 3rd Street Northwest, drove her car between 50 and 65 miles an hour. Captain Burlingame, at the wheel of the other car, refused to take the chances that the girl took in meeting the other cars, and was forced at times, when the road was clear, to make 75 miles an hour to keep up with her. "I was acting as a convoy car to get the police out of the way so a load of liquor could get through," the girl is said to have boasted at the House of Detention, where she was taken before being brought to court. In hurry, she tells court. In court, however, she refused to make any statement except that she was guilty and was in a hurry to get to town. The climax to her wild ride, however, ended dismally when she was fined $100 in traffic court by Judge Isaac R. Hitt, the maximum fine for reckless driving, and didn't have a cent in her pocket. She borrowed 5 cents from a bailiff to phone her friends for aid. The car, which is now at number 9 Precinct Station, has no back seats. It contains 3 charred kegs and the floor is covered with cornmeal. June 28th, 1925. Motherless chicks become proteges of fine collie dog. Teddy, a black and white collie dog owned by Mrs. J.B. Ferguson, wife of a farmer near here, has adopted and is caring for a brood of 17 motherless chickens. They were deserted by their own mother, and Mrs. Ferguson shortly afterward found that Teddy had marshalled them all into his kennel and was sitting on guard outside to keep them there. Since then, he has rounded up his brood every evening and guarded them throughout the night. June 29th, 1925. Gold medal for hero. McMullen to get substitute for silver one lost in rescue. A gold medal will be given in place of the silver one lost by Horace J. McMullen of the Washington Canoe Club when he saved W.R. Donegan from drowning near Key Bridge June 13. The lost medal had been won by McMullen in a 90-yard swimming race at Woodman Park Pool. The Woodman Park Swimming Club plans to give him the gold medal bearing the inscription for Horace J. McMullen in place of his silver medal lost June 13, 1925. He was assisted in the rescue by Carl Knight and Farnham Miller, both of the Canoe Club. June 30th, 1925. Former newspaper woman has thrill right in office. This is the third of a series of articles that the Milwaukee Leader will carry telling of the experiences of old-time Milwaukee newspaper men and women. Some of Milwaukee's most efficient newspaper workers are women, and those of the old school were no exception. On rare occasions, it will be found that women reporters can stack up against any man in the game. Edna J. Dunlop, proprietor of the Letter Shop, Broadway, one-time proofreader, assistant city editor, feature writer, and dramatic critic, was one of them. She could cover any run in town, including the police, and it is said that the scoops she obtained would greatly outnumber the times she was scooped. Here is Mrs. Dunlop's story. When Dale Conn, Chicago burglar, was arrested in the West, charged with burglaries from coast to coast, there was associated with him a prominent Chicago woman, the wife of a minister, who had met the burglar while doing missionary work in Chicago's jail. She was not mixed up in the burglaries, but was said to be in love with the convict. By chance, the woman got to Milwaukee, and by the same chance the afternoon paper on which I worked got wind of it. I was sent to find her, without any description, at the Northwestern Station, where she was to board a train for Chicago. My big thrill came when I picked her out from the numerous women in the station, she being the first one I spoke to. I got thrill number 2 when she gave me the story and 3 letters from the burglar written to her. A quick telephone connection, rapid work of talking to a stenographer who took the story and made the paper within 20 minutes from the time I left the office. It was a scoop for my paper, and I got a smile from the city editor who had a bad headache that day. P.S. The above is a mild thrill compared to the one I had on the day on which I donned my hat and coat and told the city editor to go to hell and take my damn job with him. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you thought in the comments, and please also consider watching another one of my videos. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.